Hey everybody, welcome to today's video. As always, it's so awesome to see you. Thanks so much for stopping by. Now I'm taking a wild guess here, but I am fairly certain that some of you woke up this morning thinking to yourself, you know, I hope Rob does a video on ukuleles today. Far be it for me to disappoint you, so that is indeed today's topic. Back in 2024, in the fall, November, I was fortunate enough to be able to take a trip to Hawaii. And I was there about a week and I visited 3 islands. I did Oahu, the Big Island itself, and then Maui. I have been fortunate to travel to some pretty exotic locations on this spinning planet of ours. And one of the things that I've gotten in the habit of doing is to look for indigenous musical instruments. I think this started back in my first international trip to Syria when I brought a drum back, and I actually made a video on this experience. If you are interested, here's the link for it here. That was definitely a fun night. So in thinking about Hawaii, and of course, the very first instrument that popped into my head was the ukulele. And being a somewhat suspect guitarist, I decided, you know, maybe it would be fun to pick one of those up. And I didn't really know anything about the instrument outside of that it was just a smaller size. But, you know, what better place to learn about them than in Hawaii? Throughout my week there, I did manage to go to quite a few ukulele shops. There was an interesting dynamic, though, in almost all of these. The first was a surprising lack of customer service. Now, I get it. Hawaii is an extremely laid-back place, and, you know, maybe my expectations were misplaced on that, but quite often people would just be sitting behind the counter, and they would recognize you when you came in, say hello, but none of them really seemed terribly eager to do much beyond that. And it also probably stems from tourists like me coming in and looking at the ukuleles and then turning around and walking out. The other thing that happened was I would look at all the ukuleles, and there were some interesting ones, but again, without knowing what I was getting into and not really knowing the instrument, you know, really wasn't interested in just buying something blindly. And the third thing I learned was how expensive ukuleles are. More on that in a moment. So a week had gone by. I'd gone to quite a few shops on the islands and had pretty much given up the search at this point. On my last day, though, I was in Kahului in Maui. I had a few hours to kill before I needed to go to the airport, so I Googled ukuleles in my area, and I happened to find that there was a shop nearby, and it was called Bounty Music. When I walked in the door, the salesman greeted me right off the bat, you know, came around from the counter and offered to show me whatever I wanted to see with ukuleles. He was awesome, definitely patient, and he gave me a quick education on the instrument. The first thing he discussed was the 4 main sizes of ukuleles, and that would be soprano, concert, tenor, and baritone, from smallest to largest respectively. He also called them ukes, so I quickly learned that you don't have to say ukulele every time that you're talking about the instrument. Ukes. I also learned that the majority of ukes on the islands of Hawaii are actually imported from places like China and Indonesia. The handmade ones that are found from a handful of luthiers in Hawaii are extremely expensive. These I saw behind glass cases, behind the counter. I mean, they were gorgeous instruments. But the handmade ones ran from anywhere from like, you know, over $1,000. I saw some that were literally $6,000 to $8,000, and that blew my mind. I mean, there isn't that much wood with some of these, but oh my gosh, you know, I guess it's supply and demand, and tapping into tourists like me who want a handmade Hawaiian instrument, but yeah, no, that was way out of my budget, so I didn't even bother with that. But truly, oh, those were some gorgeous ukes. So given the varied price range of these, I decided I needed to target somewhere. There were some touristy types that were $100 or less, but they were essentially glorified toys, souvenir type things. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you're after. But you would find, those would have hula girls painted on them or volcanoes or some such. And I wanted a real instrument, but I also didn't want to spend a real amount of money. So I targeted $250 to $300. There were actually quite a few in that price range. I also decided upon the tenor size, which was the third largest. It just felt more comfortable to me and also projected a little bit more than the others. I also tried some that were on the next tier up, which were like $600 to $800. And one of those was a Martin ukulele, and from the Martin Guitar Company. And that one actually sounded really good. I played that one quite a bit, but honestly, I couldn't justify the cost of it. And a lot of those in that particular price range, the step up from the $200 to $300 range, a lot of it was cosmetics. Then they started making them look a little bit nicer. But sound quality wise, they weren't that much better. So I ventured back to the $200 to $300 range, or thereabouts in that area. And I did find a couple that I went back and forth. One was from a company called Pono Guitar and Ukulele Company. The other was, if I remember correctly, Kala, which is another really popular brand there on the islands. And I ended up choosing this one. It is a Pono tenor ukulele. I'm going to read the specs here so I don't have to memorize this, but it is an ATK model. It is a ukulele tenor, and it is made front, the sides, and the back from acacia wood. And I just really loved the feel of this, but also just the wood grain on it is really pretty. If you don't know, on a ukulele, one of the things string-wise that they have is they have the highest string first. So this is a high G, and then it goes to a lower C, and then E, and then A. It's just a different way of setting up the strings. It kind of gives it a unique flavor. They did make ukuleles that did start with a lower G, but I decided no, I wanted to keep it kind of traditional on that front. Another selling point on this particular brand, I don't know if you can see this, but right in here, there is a hole there. And again, I don't know if you can see it, but this particular brand, Pono, one of the things that I liked about them is they include a dowel rod on their ukes. For those of you who don't know what that is, that really is kind of like it sounds. It's a rod, a metal rod that goes the length of the neck here. What can often happen sometimes with any stringed instrument, especially acoustics, is that they can bow due to weather, humidity, and the like, and it can make the action on the strings a little bit more difficult to play. So if an instrument has got a dowel rod in it, they can adjust that and bring it back down to make it a little bit more level and a little bit easier to play. Now, I found it interesting that a lot of the ukes there did not have dowel rods. So maybe it was an extra step that's not really needed. Maybe there's not much bowing just because of the size. But I opted to play it safe because I'd love for this to stay in the family. And so this one's got a dowel rod. The music store also threw in a chord chart for me. I did have to buy a case, and I guess I really haven't discussed how much I spent on this, but this was $350. And, a little bit more, but, not that much more. I did have to buy a hard case, as I mentioned, and that one was $80. And they did have to ship it to me. Now, if I recall, I can't remember if I paid for shipping or not, But it did arrive at my home about 10 daes later, and they gave me tracking numbers and they packed it up really nicely. So, I was just really glad when it arrived at my home and reminded me of my stay on the islands. So yeah, I've got another instrument to learn. I don't know what I'm thinking, but I have just been able to hit the tip of the iceberg on just some basic chords with this thing. And I am looking forward to learning more about it. And who knows, maybe I'll do some recordings with it down the road. At least that's definitely the hope. But I thought I'd play just a little bit, basic as it is, so you can hear it. I am going to use a pick, so it projects a little bit more. Most of the uke players in Hawaii that I saw, they did not play with a pick though. So, bear that in mind, and let's see if I can get through this. Yeah, nice little sound. Anyways, that's it for today's video. I hope that you are doing well. I hope this has been somewhat informative about ukuleles just in general. Aloha! Until next time. Light and love to you all. Take care now.